Joining us today to discuss the latest in Congress is U.S. Representative Thomas Massie. Thank you for joining us today here at the New American.
It's always good to be on the New American show with you, Christian.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So, Congressman Massie, you and some of your colleagues, including Congresswoman Majority Green, filed a lawsuit not too long ago against Nancy Pelosi. Can you tell us a little bit about that lawsuit, why you filed it, and how it's progressing right now through the court?
Yeah, sure thing. Back in June, Nancy Pelosi said that if everyone in the House didn't get vaccinated, everyone had to wear a mask forever. And I said, that ain't going to fly. It's time to take these masks off and make our stand. So 10 of us went to the floor of the House without masks and blatantly violated the rule. And so she deducted money from our salaries as punishment. The problem with doing that is the 27th Amendment to the Constitution, which was ratified in 1992, but proposed by the founders alongside the Bill of Rights, says that you cannot vary a member of Congress's salary without an intervening election. Now, they wanted to do that, obviously, to keep us from raising our own salaries, but they also knew, and they mentioned this at the time, that compensation was the sustenance for someone, to use Hamilton's words, and that if somebody had power over your compensation, they could bend you to their will. And so, for instance, the Constitution also requires that the judicial appointments, that their salaries not vary. So we pointed that out to the judge. By the way, we filed this lawsuit. It's myself, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ralph Norman. It's titled Massie v. Pelosi. There are two other defendants, the Sergeant at Arms and the Chief Administrative Officer of the House. And we're alleging a violation of the base Constitution, which says the salaries have to be set by law, which means that the Senate and the President would have to agree, and a violation of the 27th Amendment. We're also alleging that she violated our First Amendment by compelling our speech, by making us project an image with the masks that we didn't believe in. Because, Christian, as soon as you walk off the floor of the House and go to our meetings and our dinners and in the hallways, we take the masks off. And even though there's a rule outside of the House, there's no fine outside of that chamber. So we said this is about theater and this is about First Amendment speech. And we were able to make those oral arguments in federal court just last week in Massie v. Pelosi. We're not sure how the judge will rule. He will rule within 30 days. He said it's a case of first impression. In other words, we are going to set precedent here. He couldn't just say, well, this other case has been tried and it applies, and so this is how it ends up. So whatever happens, if we prevail, Pelosi will appeal. If Pelosi prevails, we will appeal. It will go to the appellate court, and then after that, I presume we'll get it to the Supreme Court, and that's where we will win or lose.
Presuming that, let's say, Pelosi prevails ultimately, even at the Supreme Court, just hypothetically, wouldn't that empower Pelosi to issue fines or deduct pay for any time a member of the House of Representatives acts or maybe even votes contrary to her preferred positions?
Well, she could cut your pay to zero. If you did something contrary to her positions. The majority could make a rule, and then she could enforce it with any amount of penalty. She's able to punish us now. The Constitution says that we can be, that each chamber makes its own rules, and that they can dole out punishments. The problem, like censure or reprimand, or even with a 2/3 vote, you can be removed from Congress. But the one thing the Constitution precludes her from doing is changing salaries, and for very good reason. Now, I realize I'm here trying to defend that congressmen's salaries shouldn't be cut, but understand that this is broader than that. This is a fight about the vaccine mandates. This is a fight about the masks. And people back home, even though it's being deducted in a different way, people are seeing their salaries reduced if they don't get vaccinated. They're seeing their jobs eliminated if they refuse to get vaccinated or wear a mask. And so we're having this fight here because we can and because we have standing in this court.
Now, one of your other efforts right now in the House of Representatives is H.R. 3860, your bill that would end Biden's vaccine mandates for members of the armed forces. What's the latest on that bill, and why do your other colleagues who haven't yet co-sponsored it, why do they need to co-sponsor that now before it's too late?
Well, unfortunately, for some people, it is too late. But it needs to be co-sponsored because it's reducing morale in the military. There are people who won't sign up for the military because they don't want to get vaccinated. And there's going to be a round of boosters coming. And technically, for some, like the National Guard, the deadlines haven't hit yet. So that's why they need to sign up. Now, Biden has 5 vaccine mandates. He's got the military mandate, which my bill, H.R. 3860, would undo. By the way, we've got a discharge petition going right now in the House, which means if we could get 218 signatures, we can override Pelosi and get an immediate vote on H.R. 3860 on the floor of the House. So whether your member has co-sponsored this bill or not, ask them to sign that discharge petition. So at least we can get a vote on it. And you may think it's a lost cause, but just this week, the Senate passed, 2 Democrats crossed party lines. They passed a bill to repeal the OSHA vaccine mandate that Biden has. So that's passed in the Senate. So there is a chance if we could get a vote on it, we could get Democrats. So let me roll through the other 3 vaccine mandates. So you have the military vaccine mandate. You've got the federal employee vaccine mandate. I question whether that one's constitutional. But then there's the other 3, which have already been ruled illegal or unconstitutional and have nationwide injunctions against them. That's the OSHA mandate on employers of 100 or more. You've got the CMS mandate, which is for they're enforcing it through withholding Medicare or Medicaid payments to healthcare providers. And then finally, you've got the federal contractor mandate. So those last 3 mandates have been suspended in courts. I'm fighting with H.R. 3860, the military mandate. And I hope there's a lawsuit against the federal employee mandate. I have asked at least 20 different branches or agencies how many waivers they have granted, because the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that was passed in the 90s requires them to grant religious exemptions. And frankly, I've sent letters to these agencies. FEMA is the only one so far that's responded to me. And so I got to give them credit. They've told me at least how many people have applied and that they do plan to grant exemptions.
And speaking of OSHA, which you just mentioned, you and Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona, have introduced legislation, or at least are in the process of introducing the legislation, I think it is, to abolish OSHA. I'm not sure if that's been given a bill number yet, but can you tell us a little bit about that bill and why OSHA has to go out altogether?
Yeah, we have introduced that bill, and I don't know the bill number off the top of my head, but it would just eliminate OSHA. Okay, H.R. 5813 is that bill. So it would eliminate OSHA altogether. Look, one of the most troubling things about Biden's 3 unconstitutional vaccine mandates that have been stopped by the courts is that the agencies who were tasked with enforcing them did not even question the fact that they were illegal. He told them to do something that was illegal, and they carried it out. And they were carrying it out until the court stopped them. So it's almost Orwellian. The very agency that's supposed to protect you from your employer doing something to you that you don't want is forcing you to have your employer do something to you don't want. They also went from at the beginning of the pandemic and the vaccine, they were requiring that the companies who had a vaccine mandate record and report those who had been injured. Like, that's typically what the role of OSHA is. You've got to report workplace injuries, track them, and then hold employers accountable if they were at fault. Well, that was the path they started down, and then they did a 180-degree reversal against what they're supposed to do and said these are not reportable anymore, these vaccine injuries that are caused by employer mandates.
Absolutely. And of course, OSHA really empowers the federal government to go into the workplace and tell businesses how they should be run and should not be run. And in an idealistic, liberty-based society that follows the Constitution as the founding fathers envisioned, there wouldn't even be an OSHA to begin with. This is the creation of the Nixon era anyway.
Yeah. Well, and some people on Twitter have suggested that, maybe if your employer is carrying out the OSHA mandate, that you should report any other infractions that you see at your place of employment directly to OSHA immediately now, so that they can get to work on that while they're working on the vaccine mandate.
I guess it can work both ways then.
It can work both ways, but the vaccine mandate through OSHA has been stayed by the courts. OSHA says on their website they are no longer enforcing it or spending any money doing it. If they were, they'd be breaking the law right now. And so any employer who says they are enforcing the federal contractor mandate, the CMS mandate, that's the healthcare worker mandate, or the OSHA mandate, that's the one for employees of 100 or more, if they say they are doing it because those mandates exist, they do not have the imprimatur of the federal government. They are going out on a limb, and they cannot claim they are indemnified by those mandates because those mandates do not exist currently. They've been suspended.
And hopefully all of OSHA will be suspended as well if your bill gets enacted into law.
Well, that's our goal. I've got a bill to eliminate the Department of Education, which we've talked about a lot on your show, H.R. 899. I think it's catching on. My colleagues decided to eliminate some of these other departments, and whenever I see them do that, I try to be a co-sponsor because they've been weaponized. A lot of Republicans think, oh, we can feed the rattlesnakes when we're in power, and then that they'll be nice to us when we're in power or when the Democrats are in power. But what you find out is they will quickly weaponize and go against you, against American people, in whether Republicans are in charge or Democrats are in charge.
Well, when the next Republican takes office in following the next presidential election, hopefully, perhaps then your Democratic colleagues on the other side of the fence will join you in that bill when they oppose the Republican president's nominee for education secretary like happened last time around.
That was my argument. If you don't think that Trump or his appointees should decide how or what your children learn, then you should co-sponsor H.R. 899 if you're a Democrat.
Of course, speaking of Democrats and Republicans, there was a major vote for the National Defense Authorization Act just recently. And you were one of 19 Republicans, only a handful of Republicans and maybe like 40 or so Democrats who voted against the bill. What compelled you to vote against that bill when the majority of Republicans and even Democrats voted in favor of that legislation?
Well, it's sad that I've not seen an NDAA that I can vote for. I haven't voted for an NDAA since I've been in Congress. The first one, and by the way, it's an accumulation of problems in the NDAA, not just with this one, but this one fails to fix prior problems. The first NDAA I countered, just weeks after being sworn in, funded abortions for members of the military. I was appalled. I tried to get the pro-life groups to blow the whistle, say something, do something. They wouldn't. There are NDAs that have authorized unconstitutional indefinite detention. This NDAA did not eliminate the vaccine mandate in the military. If you're going to vote for something, why would you vote to reauthorize what the military is doing if they're not eliminating vaccine mandates?
Now, in this NDAA that you voted against, it included also $300 million in military aid to the Ukrainian Security Assistance Initiative. Now, those who will recall in history, the Vietnam War began in part when President Eisenhower sent some 700 military advisors to assist the government of South Vietnam, and JFK followed suit in 61 and 62, sending upwards of about 16,000 military advisors by the end of 1962, and of course, the rest is history. Is it possible that this aid to Ukraine and sending of military advisors could be the beginnings of a future Ukrainian war, which the U.S. would get pulled into, just like Vietnam?
Look, they called them military advisors in Syria, too, here as recently as I've been in Congress. And I don't want to predict what could happen or what will happen. Obviously, I'm against it. We should not deploy any troops or euphemistically call them advisors and deploy them to Ukraine. Look, this is a European problem. Here's the reality. Europe is addicted to Russia's oil and Russia's gas. It's their energy. Some of our own politicians have encouraged them to abandon coal, and which was a source of energy that we could ship across the ocean from the United States. And Joe Biden has transitioned us from a net exporter of energy. We're going to be an importer again, certainly for some types of energy, and that's shameful. We're seeing gas prices go up here, but it also has an effect on issues like Ukraine, where Europe might be inclined to tell Russia that they can't go into Ukraine, but because they have to heat their homes this winter, they may just live with it. And we can't tell our European allies to stand up for themselves, and then because they won't, and then not support them with alternate energy sources. We should be a net exporter of energy, and we could find ourselves in the very same situation if the people who are pushing the energy policies, some of the more radical energy policies in the United States, have their way. We could be crippled to a degree such that it affects our foreign policy, and we have to accept things that we don't like, such as what may be going on in Europe right now.
Absolutely. If the Green New Deal were to take full effect, as AOC and even Biden would want, and the U.S. stopped being an exporter or producer of natural gas and gasoline and petroleum and so forth, that would only empower the Saudis and the Russians, as they would keep producing it, and that would only enrich them in their whatever military adventurism they may wish. So people like AOC and Biden are basically fueling conflict in that regard as well.
Yeah, and look at Biden's Secretary of Energy. Just a few weeks ago, they asked her very seriously what could be done to bring down energy prices, and she laughed and she said it's up to OPEC. Why would this sounds like policies of Jimmy Carter all over again? Why would we allow our country and the citizens of our country to be dependent on a monopoly, on a cartel in the Middle East?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Congressman Massie. And, of course, thank you for your consistency as being a principled constitutionalist in office. Take care, and God bless you.
God bless you. Merry Christmas, and that looks like a very Christmassy tie. So,
thank you. Merry Christmas to you and your family, and I hope that Santa Claus sends that ammo that you were asking for.
I'm very hopeful that my stocking will be full. Thanks, Christian.
Thank you.